Yeah, I've been studying this technology space for about 2 decades now and seen a lot of changes and yet a lot of things that haven't changed right since the early days. And, you know, one of the things I've noticed is that throughout this 20 years, most CPOs have been adopting this sort of database-centric view of the world, and all the vendors have been pushing this database-centric view of the world. If only we could get all our data in one place, then we would have this omnipotence and omniscience that we've been searching for, and it's always failed, and it will continue to fail. So I wholeheartedly reinforce what Eloise was saying about forget the ERP approach and forget these approaches which rely on every process going through one system so that we can get all the data in one database. It's never going to happen. And the future is much more this sort of multi-planetary world of a solar system, if you like, where maybe there is some core systems at the heart. The sun here might be some transactional ERP systems. But around that are specialist platforms looking after suppliers or employees or customers. And those specialist platforms are also surrounded by an ecosystem of moons of specialist niche products. So I say the ERP approaches, the database-centric approaches have failed and will continue to fail. And I put some reasons up here as to why they always fail. I did some studies before I left Forrester about the major vendors and where their products came in our evaluations of different categories, not just in procurement, but marketing and e-commerce and HR. And consistently, the bigger vendors do consistently badly. So that's a problem. And the solution is the modern world of more easily integrated applications. And we're not seeing this only in procurement. Every space, HR, e-commerce, marketing, customer experience, every space is following the same path of moving away from the omni-suite approach to this world of a core platform doing most of the work, but then surrounded by an ecosystem of specialist tools, all of which are designed from the ground up to integrate with the major platforms through this thing called a Mac architecture, which is, if I remember it correctly, is modular and API driven and cloud native. So that's great news because it means if you look at the wealth of innovation that's coming in the procurement space, most of the products will integrate very well with the core platforms that you're using. It's not the same at all to the problems that we faced 20 years ago when we tried to follow a best-of-breed solution and we were trying to integrate it with ERP solutions which were just not designed to integrate with the outside world. There is so much innovation going on, and the bigger players are investing a lot, and they're innovating very well, but they just can't keep up with the demands that are changing from you as their customer base, however hard they try. So there's always great stuff coming from smaller vendors that is beyond what the bigger players are doing. And you should always be ready to embrace that and build it into your solution. Never think that, oh, let me just wait until I get my suite implemented and then my life will be easier. You will never get to that point. You will always need these add-on solutions. Now, tomorrow and Thursday, you can see at the event dozens of very interesting vendors, and it may be a little bit bewildering as how do you navigate this landscape. And I'd like to suggest that one way to navigate that landscape is to think in terms of the vendors in these really 4 core categories. So, of course, as analysts, we like to divide the world up into 4 categories or 6 categories. I've got 6 here. 2 of them are ones I think you should avoid, and 4 I think will always be part of your solution going forward. So the core here is the major SVM platforms. Now, I coined the term supplier value management because I wanted to put the focus on getting value from suppliers. I didn't want to have something that relied on arguing the difference between sourcing and procurement and purchasing. So I've put the focus on the value, but it's everything to do with sourcing and contracts and procurement and spend analytics and all that sort of stuff. You can get a lot of that from an SVM platform, but you may never get all of it, and it may take you years to roll out that platform throughout your business. So you're likely to always be complementing that with these sort of over-the-top solutions, these enterprise-wide solutions, and I've given you some examples there, which layer on top of the transactional ERP systems, and if you've got multiple sourcing and procurement systems, they layer on top of those, so you can get this global visibility that we've been trying to get from a single database. And so it could be a contract management solution layered on top of everything, or the supplier management system layered on top of everything, or the spend analytics. All of these are good approaches when you have this fragmented landscape of transactional systems. Then in addition to those, you will probably need to have some specialist solutions that are very laser focused on one part of the sourcing or the procurement area. So they might be trying to forecast price movements in certain commodities, or they might be trying to use AI to negotiate via emails with suppliers, or something like that, something very innovative, maybe focusing on tail spend or something like that. Now, these are great things to try out. They're quite risky. A lot of the vendors that you will see tomorrow will not be around in 2 or 3 years' time. And some of them will and will take off, and you can't necessarily tell which those are going to be. So you should be trying these out with a risk-tolerant approach, knowing that some of your pilots are going to succeed and some of them aren't. And I think for these specialist solutions, I think the best approach is to help people in your organization, different business units or different departments, just test the solution out, see what works, and then if they seem to be working, encourage other business units to try them out and gradually roll them out to the rest of the organization. You're not trying to, from day one, make an enterprise-wide rollout of some unproven email negotiation software. The other category I've got here is what I call the category marketplaces. Now, there are some tools that have been very much focused on buying certain types of product or service. One of the problems with the main SVM platforms is that they don't really understand the dynamics of sourcing a lot of categories where the requirements for picking a supplier are quite unique to that category. So we see a lot of tools. Again, I've nominated a few here that are really good at sourcing professional services or contingent labor or facilities management or freight services or maybe web advertising space. There's dozens of them. And if you buy those categories, you're probably going to want to embed these in your solution and integrate them with the main platform. So if somebody wants to buy something, they may go through the main catalog-based procurement, or they may be directed to one of these marketplaces. Now, one of the neat things about the marketplaces is because they have this focus on a particular category, they know the key suppliers in that category, and so they're doing a lot of the work to get the supplier data to validate that the suppliers are legal and ethical and reliable. So it takes a lot of that onboarding effort away from you, provided that you pick marketplaces which are taking ownership of that and actually validating and vouching for the suppliers in their marketplace. It's not sufficient. It's not sufficient to take the sort of the Amazon approach of caveat emptor. We're just the marketplace. We don't actually promise that the merchants on our site are any good or not. That's not acceptable. You need to make sure that the marketplace is vouching for the suppliers that it's sending to you to. So I've talked a little bit about the ERP providers not innovative enough, not focused on procurement. If you didn't believe Eloise, believe it when I say the same, and if your colleagues don't believe you, then get them to speak to people like me, and we can reaffirm why an ERP-centric approach is not the answer going forward. The other challenge you'll have is the IT guy who says, oh, what you're doing, it's just workflow. It's just workflow. We can build that it'll take me 4 days to build that in Force.com or Dynamics or ServiceNow or whatever. Don't believe them. They don't know what they're talking about. So part of the point of this presentation is to give you the confidence to go back to them and say, no, this stuff is not just workflow. I need solutions that are designed to understand why procurement is different from all these other areas, and I'm not going to try and build my own solution from your workflow platform, which may be very good, but the solutions I'm picking are all of them, without exception, built on very good workflow platforms. So the sort of low-code configurability, all that stuff, you get that anyway. So not to worry. So hopefully I'm giving you this picture of, your end state is not that world in your hand. It's not that everything going through the one SVM suite. It's this combination of the suite, over-the-top solutions, and specialist solutions working together. Okay, so the next question is, how do I pick the solutions which are going to be best for me as an organization? And when I was speaking to clients, I would ask a few questions to try and gauge, firstly, how mature they were as an organization from a procurement point of view, and also how federated and heterogeneous they are, to have this sort of analysis to say, if you are kind of on the bottom right, so highly federated and not really super mature from a procurement point of view, then you want to be picking a different type of solution than if you're highly centralized and really good at procurement. And if you're kind of on the top right, you might want to have more flexibility because you know what you're doing and you want to support different business units doing things slightly differently. Whereas if you're bottom right and you buy a platform that's really flexible, your immature business units are going to be configuring it to death and you're going to end up with a mess. So if you're towards the bottom, you need a vendor that will give you a much more prescriptive approach, an implementation partner who will come with best practices and say, this is how you should be doing it. Whereas if you're more mature, you could say, well, we know how to do things. We want the system to support the way we currently work. And of course, for those of you with multiple ERPs, you're going to want to buy the solutions that are built to live in that world of complexity. There are some which are great if you've got one ERP, if you're highly centralized, but they really don't work as well for the more decentralized organization. Now, I said before, don't believe your IT colleague saying it's just workflow. And I hopefully give you some arguments as to why an out-of-the-box solution is going to be so much better than building something yourself with a workflow tool. There is just too much specific to procurement. The requirements change, new laws come in, new requirements come in about data you need to collect from suppliers and validate. The logic of routing requests to the right person in your organization to deal with them requires too much understanding of how procurement works. And if you try to code that in your own workflow tool, well, your IT folks may be able to do that first time, but then some new requirement comes in that you have to collect information like the new German supply chain law, and you have to explain it to them as what it's required, and then you have to wait in line until maybe in a year's time, you get some solution which doesn't quite work. Whereas if you're buying an out-of-the-box solution from a specialist product, they will come up with a solution to the new German supply chain law without you having to really understand it. So that's just one example of why specialist products win. Now, the counter-argument from IT is, well, we've got all these different user interfaces, and people, like consistency, and we want to have everything, one experience for everybody. That's rubbish. You only need a consistent user interface if it's so awful that it takes a long time to learn how to use it. That's the sort of the SAP approach. All the modern tools that I'm talking about have been designed to be usable, and they don't need a lot of training. And we as modern users, we cope with different websites that they follow a basic vocabulary and syntax of how websites work. We're not fazed by that. So if the user experience is good, it doesn't matter that it's slightly different from the other ones. The fact that it's designed for a specific task and designed for us as users is much more important. And again, we're seeing this not just in procurement, but in every category, in marketing, in sales support. The business leaders are increasingly spending their own money, making their own decision about which tools they are going to use, because it's their success. Their career depends on success. They're not going to let IT fob them off with their mediocre tools. I'm being rude to IT. Not all IT people are like this. There are a lot of very forward-thinking IT people who get this, who are pushing forward with these modular Mac-based strategies. There are a few who, are still stuck in the ERP world. It's what I call, they've got Stockholm syndrome. They've been hostages of the ERP vendors for so long that they're now kind of associating with them. So you have to weed out those colleagues with Stockholm syndrome and find the ones who really get this sort of modern environment. And if anybody says about integration, really, the modern world, integration is just not the problem that it used to be. It's not trivial, but these solutions are designed to integrate with each other. So let me give an example of how the modern AI-powered supplier can work in the specific example of supplier experience, which is the theme of this event. I've got some ideas here. The first thing is a portal, like we've heard described a couple of times, which at least will allow the supplier to tell us once about any important information, and we'll then replicate that out to the whatever transactional systems need to know about it. That's the first step. It's still not great. I mean, relying on supplier self-service is still an outdated approach, because what we really should be moving to is more of a community approach, where the supplier tells the world about a change to its important data, publishes information about its carbon footprint or its ESG policies, and everybody automatically is updated about that change, kind of like a LinkedIn view of the world. The category-specific communities are very powerful here, of allowing the suppliers to update the community once, and then all the customers in the community get to hear about it. So move to the Tell Me Once supplier portal first, but don't think that's the end stage. That's really a step onto a Tell Everyone at Once approach. Collect the publicly available data. Don't be asking questions of suppliers of anything at all that you could find out yourself if you weren't too lazy to do it. And I asked Eloise about, if it's published on the website, why do you need to ask the supplier a question about it? You need to be able to get the data that's in the public domain and use it. And it's just an egocentric, lazy approach to ask the supplier to tell you what you should already know. AI can help with scoring of the responses. So we're increasingly seeing software that can understand the answer that the supplier has given and assess to what extent it matches with satisfactory answers that have been graded well by the human assessors in the past. And it can then suggest to the human, well, we think this answer is a 4 out of 5 or a 3 out of 5. And then the humans can spend their time looking at the ones which are highlighted as maybe imperfect responses, rather than doing the basic legwork. It's getting better and better, this type of software, but it is copying the human. So if the human is consistently prejudiced or misguided, the algorithm will be similarly prejudiced and misguided, but at least it's saving time in the process, which is really important. And then the last part is we want to integrate this supplier approval process with the sourcing and procurement processes that are going on elsewhere in the organization. So we heard a lot of people talking earlier on about supplier approval, supplier onboarding, and maybe actually we ought to be doing less supplier onboarding. We ought to be making use more of our existing suppliers. And often the reason we get all these supplier onboarding requests is because the people who are raising them didn't know that we already had perfectly good, proven, validated suppliers who could provide that product or service. So I think the first step in the supplier onboarding experience is to prevent it happening and steering people to the existing suppliers. And of course, the user is going to be happy if they can get their stuff faster just by using an existing supplier and not having to wait for 6 months while you onboard somebody. That's really beneficial. So just to wrap that up, the key takeaways here is really create for your organization a roadmap to this comprehensive supplier value management, but do that combining the leading platforms with these specialist solutions, the over-the-top ones, the category-specific ones, and these new innovative, highly focused ones, and regard that as an end state. As you can roll out a major platform to more business units and more processes, but it will never be complete. You will always need these complementary solutions with it. Implement some enterprise-wide solutions. I hear one or two companies saying, well, we're a bit busy at the moment. We're just rolling out Cooper or GEP or whatever. We're just rolling that out at the moment, and wait till we finish that, and then we'll consider this other solution. That's the wrong approach. You have too many needs which require this global visibility. So it's really a complementary strategy to be rolling out the main platform at the same time as implementing these other enterprise-wide solutions. We heard that from Ruth. Heineken is a great example of this. And then the last point is really encourage adoption of the innovation by supporting people around your organization, whether it's in business units or other departments, to try some of this stuff out. It might work, it might not. Just support and sponsor and monitor some pilot projects to try things out, and the ones that deliver value to the organization, roll them out further, and do that now and continually. Again, don't wait for the big rollout of the platform before you look at this wave of innovation that's coming from these independent sources. So hopefully that's a quick run through that gives you some good guidance as how to navigate this rapidly evolving landscape.